Welcome into episode 83 of The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. I'm Ken Ray.
I'm Nicholas Raba.
And I'm Nicholas Tacek.
Last week we talked about security news coming so fast and so furious that we might have to do another show soon just tackling various news items instead of the usual single topic shows that we tend to do. Now the question you may have is, did we know that soon would be now? Honestly, I think we suspected. Stories we're checking out on this week's checklist: Apple's leaky logs, making Boeing WannaCry, trying to silence Siri, the MyFitnessPal data breach, and finally a QR code reader vulnerability in iOS. Now, Apple's leaky logs either sounds like the world's best blues man or the world's worst reason to not fly. Talk to me, please, about what we're talking about when we're talking about the leaky logs.
Yeah, well, there are things called log files on your computer, and they can contain a lot of information, which is normally really helpful when it comes to diagnosing problems with your Mac. Unfortunately, there are also times when those log files can contain a bit too much information, as was the case recently when Apple was found to have been logging passwords in plain text. Pretty much a horrible situation. That is something you do not want to be logging, because passwords are supposed to be secret. On March 21st, forensic analyst Sarah Edwards published an article on something she came across that she described as both incredibly useful from a forensics perspective, but utterly horrifying from a security standpoint. It turns out that when you created a new encrypted APFS volume with disk utility that's built into macOS 10.13 or 10.13.1, it would log the password you supplied to the system's unified logs. Now, the unified logs stick around only for a few weeks before they're automatically cycled out by the operating system. But again, the fact that there's a plain text password being logged there, that's bad enough. However, after some further research, Edwards discovered that the password was also being logged to the system's install log. And that is really bad, because the install log usually only gets wiped out upon major operating system reinstalls or upgrades. So going from 10.11 to 10.12 to 10.13 and so on. It doesn't happen very often. I mean, Apple's releasing the major updates once a year or so now. Mm-hmm. So that log sticks around for about a year or so, depending on how often you upgrade. So Apple partially fixed the bug with the release of macOS 10.13.2, but it turned out that plain text passwords were still being logged when encrypting an already existing unencrypted APFS volume. So instead of creating a brand new encrypted one from scratch, as with the initial bug, this was if you already had one and you want to encrypt it after the fact. It took Apple another try with the release of macOS 10.13.4 to finally squash the bug, and hopefully it is gone for good at this point.
Now, I understand the dangers in having passwords stored in plain text, especially when you don't even realize it's happening. I guess the next question I have is, how accessible was this? Like, let's say this is happening on my machine. Can you then suddenly access that somehow? Or is it the danger of, so if your computer fell into the wrong hands, then you're in for a world of trouble?
It depends. It kind of depends on a few things. It depends on the type of account you're using, whether or not you're using an admin account or not for your own use on your computer. Yes, if somebody had physical access to your computer and they were able to be logged into your account, they could technically see the log file.
Or if malware was installed on your computer.
Or exactly. And that's the thing is if this is happening with, like, say you're using an admin account for this particular creating the password encrypted volume, depending on the permissions and what log it was being written to. If you were using that admin account and you got infected with malware, or if you're using a normal account, it could have kind of different consequences depending on the permissions of your account, because some user accounts, I think starting in Sierra and higher, I want to say, are unable to access some of the log files. So normal user accounts can't access some stuff that admin user accounts could access previously. So I'm not positive on that one, but anybody who was either sitting at your computer or if you got infected with malware, technically there's a risk there that they could be getting a hold of those logs and thus the password.
Next item on the list, it was about a year ago that we first heard about WannaCry, and sadly, it is crying time again. Talk to me about what's going on with Boeing and WannaCry.
Yeah, we talked about WannaCry ransomware back in May 2017, episode 38 of the checklist. If you don't remember what WannaCry, aka WannaCrypt is, it first surfaced in May as a worldwide attack. Once a single computer got infected, it could spread across the network, causing damage to Windows computers. Apparently, we weren't out of the clear yet, or at least Boeing's production plant wasn't out of the clear. At the end of March this year, Boeing reported that their production plant was hit by this attack. When the news came out, everyone was in panic and chaos. The news was echoing all across the internet as to whether or not this attack would cause crippling damage to one of the largest commercial airline manufacturers. So the chief engineer at Boeing Commercial Airplane Production Engineering sent out a memo about the virus calling for all hands on deck. And as we remember for how fast this spread and affected systems, it was a good call. However, by that afternoon, the update was, quote unquote, our cybersecurity operations center detected a limited intrusion of malware that affected a small number of systems. It continued, it went on. Remediations were applied, and this is not a production and delivery issue. So what does this teach us? As always, it's important to have backups, but also important to keep up to date on the patches. In a network environment as large as Boeing's, one could imagine how hard it is to keep things up to date. But with the proper network administrator tools and record keeping, it can be manageable with the right setup, staff, and follow through, of course.
Nancy, I can't even remember who it was that WannaCry or WannaCrypt infected. I mean, remind me, because it seems weird to me that nearly a full year later, a company as theoretically high-tech as Boeing could fall prey to something that, if memory serves, was for older systems, plus we learned about it almost a year before Boeing got hit.
Yeah, I want to say Microsoft patched it in March or April of last year, so it's been almost a year since because they issued that patch ahead of time. And then it was mostly Windows XP machines that were infected, right. And it was I think it was the NHS over in Great Britain. The hospitals and healthcare providers over there really got hit pretty bad. I want to say that some of I'm not positive if it was Maersk with shipping, if that was WannaCry that they got hit with, but there was a lot of larger companies that were hit with that. The problem that you'll see with something like this, where you say, how could Boeing be hit a year later? It might not necessarily be a situation where they were being lax in their security. It might be, and we honestly don't know because, we're not sitting inside Boeing. We don't have, details on how their setup is. But from a security standpoint, if they had some embedded systems, so you're talking about a big manufacturing plant, you're going to have some robotic control systems that are running embedded versions of operating systems. And sometimes that embedded version, for a lot of them out there, is older versions of Windows. That was the problem with some of the hospitals where you'd see like their CT machine, CT scanner would get infected because it had an embedded system. And it's not such a simple thing to upgrade an operating system when it's embedded. It's built into a chip on the computer. It's not something like it's sitting on a hard drive that you can just upgrade. So that could be a situation there where, you try your best to kind of partition those machines that might not be able to protect themselves, kind of try and almost like internally firewall them off from other stuff. If it's not possible to upgrade them, replace them, whatever measures you can take. And so that might be the case here, where it's just, you're talking about some systems, legacy systems or what have you, that literally cannot be updated or upgraded. Again, we don't know for sure, but that is the case with a lot of those big industrial scale manufacturing systems, is that they're running embedded operating systems.
Next item on the list, trying to silence Siri. I mean, one of the cool things about Siri is, the cool thing about Siri is you say, hey, you, tell me this thing, and then Siri will go ahead and tell you that thing, theoretically.
Oh, you didn't do it. You didn't trigger her.
No, I didn't do it. I want people to, just stay in the groove of the show, not, say never mind or whatever they have to say to whomever they would have to say it. Here's the thing. That's a great thing about Siri is it'll just yell out information. When that's not great is when you really don't want it to yell out that information.
Yeah, we did kind of cover this before back in episode 49 of the checklist. There were some situations back then where Siri was a bit too eager to please, inadvertently gave out information that should have remained private. It's happening again. Siri's at it again. On March 20th, Brazilian website Mac Magazine posted an article about a privacy bug present in iOS 11. The bug enabled anyone with physical access to a locked iOS device to be able to snoop on the contents of third-party lock screen notifications. Now, normally, these notifications would be hidden until the device owner authenticates with Face ID, Touch ID, or their passcode. However, anyone could simply ask Siri to read the contents of the notifications, and Siri would happily comply. Now, it might not seem like a big deal if someone can see the notifications from your third-party apps. Who cares if they know that your magic manure is ready for planting in Rutabaga Farmer 3.0? I had to bring up Rutabaga Farmer again, but other third-party apps. There are notifications that might be a bit more sensitive. Like, you'd probably want to keep the notifications private for some apps, such as Gmail, Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, or Signal. Now, it is really important to note that this security flaw only applies to notifications coming from third-party apps. Notifications from Apple's own apps, including iMessage and SMS texts, are unaffected by the security flaw. Apple is also aware of the security flaw and says it will be addressing it in an upcoming software update. But until a patch is issued, there are a couple things that you can do to keep your third-party notifications safe. First, you could simply turn off notifications for apps that could potentially have sensitive information. To do so, you'd tap the Settings app, tap Notifications, and then there's a Show on Lock Screen section, and you can basically disable the apps that you don't want their notifications to be visible. Otherwise, an easier method, I guess, would be just to disable Siri from working if your device is locked. And to do that, you tap Settings, then tap Siri and Search, and there is a little section called Allow Siri when locked, and you just disable that setting. And that way, Siri would no longer work when your phone is locked, which takes away a lot of convenience factor, but we're hoping that Apple patches this flaw pretty quick, so you won't have to go too long without Siri.
Well, I'm not trying to say that we should do this again next week, but this next story seems like one that we could actually just do. We could do a show every week now, it seems, covering something like this. MyFitnessPal and the data breach. Millions and millions of people apparently had their information accessed. See also, is it Lord & Taylor? I mean, there are like high-end retailers. There are fast food joints. There are the fitness, wearable app things. We're only going to concentrate on one today, but, this story may sound familiar to stories that came in the past and stories yet to come. Talk to me, though, about this one specifically, the data breach from MyFitnessPal.
Yeah, you name it. Any of these apps or companies, they're going to be targets. Anybody who is storing information, people are definitely going to be looking at them to try to acquire. You like how I said acquire their information. So we have apps for everything, and many apps require registration. If you created an account on someone's app, chances are they're storing your data, including your password or some form of it. This is the case of roughly 150 million user accounts of Under Armour's food and nutrition app, MyFitnessPal. At the end of March, news hit about the company having a data breach, with user information tied to those 150 million accounts having been accessed by an unknown third party. Now, out of the data stored, they disclosed that the attacker had obtained usernames, passwords, and email addresses. First things first, this is a reminder, it is important not to use the same password across different sites, because now you'll need to change the password not only on MyFitnessPal if you decide to keep on using it, but on all the other sites you might have used the same password on. This is where a password manager comes into play and is truly awesome. In this case, no banking information or financial details were obtained, so you probably won't receive 3 extra months of credit monitoring service. If that username and password is the same you use on any banking or financial institution, change the password now. Under Armour seemed very quick to disclose this breach, which is awesome because it gives you a chance to change your passwords quicker with a lower chance of other accounts to be affected. And this is another reminder to set up two-factor authentication if any of the sites or services offer it, because I think you would rather receive an alert saying somebody's trying to log into your account than not receive any alert and have somebody drain your account or gain access to other information. So
you would even do that on something like a fitness app, though?
I'd be surprised if they offered it, to tell you the truth.
Chances are the fitness app doesn't offer it, but...
Oh, you're talking about anybody else. I'm sorry. My apologies. So if you were using the same password on your MyFitness app as well as your Chase account...
Which you shouldn't be, but if you were...
Right. Yeah. You should not be. But if you were, at least in this case, when somebody tried to use that password to go into your Chase account,
exactly,
Chase obviously is going to have 2FA. And so then when somebody's trying to log into your bank account, you're going to get a notification saying, so this is you, right? We want to make sure that, before we let you in, that it's actually you trying to do it.
And same with Apple ID, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And if you do receive that alert, that means somebody has your password, which means you need to change your password.
Right.
And just one thing, this is a little bit of a going off to the side here, but just one other thing with 2FA that I saw recently, there is another scam going around where you'll get a text message from a random number saying, did you try and reset your Google password? If so, please text the numbers you just received back to us. And that's a thing. When you get those numbers for two-factor authentication, you're going to be entering them on a website. You're not going to be giving them back to somebody who texts you out of the blue, because that is a scammer trying to get those numbers from you. The whole point of two-factor authentication is that your phone is the second device. You're getting a number on your phone and then typing into your laptop or computer or what have you, your mobile browser even, I guess. But it's not something that you want to be texting back to somebody else.
That gets really crazy when you're talking about the Apple things, though, right? Because I know I've gotten it before where I'm trying to log into an Apple service on my Mac, but because I have my phone tied in with iMessage on my Mac, my iPad, and my iPhone, I'll get the text message or get the message with the numbers I'm supposed to type in to my computer on my computer.
Yep. I had that happen too. And it doesn't happen all the time. It actually made me wonder if there's something funky with the way Apple has that set up, but...
No, that's because you have your Messages app set to receive notifications or copies of it as well. Oh. So there's no way to actually turn that off if it's, a trusted device that's receiving a copy of the message.
So then the problem that you have to worry about is, if somebody figures out how to spoof that, then you're kind of, hosed. But hopefully they won't.
Spoof it. Or they have physical access to your computer, which happens to receive copies of your SMS messages, and then you're screwed there anyway.
Let's just go outside and play. Actually, let's go ahead and finish up the list, because we got one more item that we're hitting today. Apple strikes out with QR codes. I think the one bit of good news here, at least in the States, is most people don't even realize what QR codes are. Still. Years and years later.
Okay, so guys, did you guys know that iOS had a native QR code reader built in? Because I had no clue.
I will tell you, honestly, I remember them saying...
I know it didn't at first.
Right. I remember them saying they were going to, and then I completely forgot about the fact that they were going to. And then when this hit, I was like, well, where's the QR code reader? And I went looking, and then read the article, and it's like, oh... It is literally built in. And
that is exactly what I said. I know there were third-party apps, but Apple went for years without adding that in.
Yeah.
And, I just figured it was a whole Steve Jobs, we're not going to do Flash, we're not going to do QR codes thing, to be honest. But it turns out that they did actually add one in iOS 11, and it came with an added bonus in the form of a sneaky security vulnerability. Yay, bonuses. But before we cover the vulnerability, let's actually talk about what a QR code is, because I don't think it's actually something we've ever covered on the show before. We're all probably familiar with traditional barcodes. They're used to store information in a format that is easy to scan, even if the barcode is partially obscured. They're located on the packaging for pretty much any product you purchase at a store. They're used to quickly ring up the price at checkout counter when you go shopping. There are other uses as well. Now, a QR code is a specialized type of barcode known as a matrix barcode. It's two-dimensional, and QR stands for quick response. It was first designed for use in Japanese automotive industry. And a QR code can store more data than a traditional UPC barcode, and it has seen widespread adoption and use in a variety of formats in recent years. Some of the places you might have seen them, they're on everything from concert or airline tickets to advertisements these days. So, maybe you have to think about it, but yeah, maybe you saw some weird little box that was scanned at the airport last time you went on your flight, and that would be a QR code. Oftentimes, a print advertiser will actually include a QR code and a message that has something along the lines of "Scan our QR code to learn more." When a user scans the QR code with a smartphone, it can do stuff. One of the things is it can automatically bring up a web page on the advertiser's site, which provides more information on that product. And that is a really quick and easy way to get someone who is reading a print advertisement to that advertiser's website. You're not having to manually type in the URL. That can tend to be an error-prone process, especially if your domain name is anything more complex than apple.com. So let me backtrack. Let's get back to the vulnerability in Apple's QR code reader. On March 24th, a German computer security researcher posted about a security flaw that he discovered in the new QR code scanner that's built into iOS 11. Normally, when you scan a QR code that contains an embedded website URL, iOS will show you the link address and basically say, hey, do you really want to visit this site in Safari? Now, the only problem is that Apple's QR code reader can be tricked into displaying a different URL from the one that it'll actually go to if you say, yeah, I want to visit that site. The researcher created a custom QR code that, if you scanned it with iOS 11, it would display a notification asking if the user wanted to open facebook.com in Safari. So if you said, yeah, sure, I want to do that, no, it wouldn't open Facebook. It would open the security researcher's own website. Now, this particular example was pretty benign. The guy didn't do anything bad with it. He was one of the good guys. But the fact that the vulnerability exists could open the door to some phishing attempts. For example, a bad guy could print up a bunch of professional-looking flyers pretending to be some legitimate business, advertising, hey, scan this QR code and you can get a free iPhone or free meal or something like that. And then by creating a specially crafted QR code that would make it look like it was going to open that legitimate website and instead went to a malicious website, the bad guys could have a text field saying, hey, we need your name, address, credit card number, and date of birth in order to send you your free iPhone. And yeah, that sounds too good to be true, but there are going to be some people who would fall for that, and they'd get more than they bargained for, not in a good way. Getting phished like that, it happens. There are websites already that do that normally on the internet. So this is taking it into the realm of mobile phones. Now, the security researcher did notify Apple about the flaw all the way back on December 23rd, 2017. And at least at the time of this episode, and when we're recording here, Apple still hasn't released a patch for it.
Yeah. So I joked about actually this in particular on an episode of macOS Ken, because he gave him 3 months, right? He told Apple on December 23rd, and then March 24th is when he went ahead and released the information that he had anyway. But December 23rd was a Saturday, and it was the Saturday before Christmas, which was a Monday holiday, which means, well, he gave them 3 months. He actually only gave them 2 months and 3 weeks, except then the following week is New Year's week, and there's a Monday holiday there as well. So really, he only gave him 2.5 months. And I'm kind of joking, but I'm kind of serious when I ask, how long will a researcher generally sit on something before they're like, all right, listen, I gave you time, you didn't do it. So I'm going to go ahead and tell everybody what's going on and hopefully light a fire under Apple to do something about this QR vulnerability.
It really depends. I think with like Google's Project Zero, the default is 90 days. And I honestly don't know if they count. I think they, as far as I'm aware, holidays don't technically matter to, from the security perspective. When you got the clock ticking, you say you've got 90 days from the date I first got a hold of you. Now, we don't really know, sometimes security researchers will sit on the bugs for longer, especially if the company is communicating with them back and forth and saying proactively, yes, we're taking steps to fix this. Yes, here's the update that it will be in, basically showing, that they're actually taking concrete steps to fix it. But when you are a company and you're not responding back to the security researcher who in good faith contacted you about this bug, and the security researcher isn't seeing it fixed in any of these betas you're releasing in the meantime, and it seems like it fell through the cracks. Sometimes it does. That's the only way to do it, is to get, light a fire under the company's butt by releasing it publicly. We can debate the ethics and morals of that till the sun goes down, but, sometimes it's better than some amount of responsible disclosure is better than not notifying the company ahead of time at all, just dropping it as a 0 day. And you don't really see that very often from security researchers. You'll see that from usually if a hacker will publish an exploit. But in this case, we don't really know the details. We don't know what kind of contact the guy was having with Apple or not. So I don't know if we could really make a judgment call here. But 3 months, 3 months is a fairly decent amount of time for a company the size of Apple to at least get the ball rolling on that, I'd say.
And do you know if this QR code was specific to Apple's code, or if this is something that existed like back in the day when Android phones or whatever other operating system techniques were used to bring up fake websites, I'm
not positive. I know I read something in there about there was something that I don't know if it was in the comments or something like that, but somebody was saying that something similar was happening with Firefox, the mobile browser. So it might have actually been an issue in the somebody was saying Firefox and Vivaldi on Windows 10 have a different way of interpreting the example URL that security researcher used, and they'll automatically kind of replace the backslash that was included in the custom QR code, and they'll use a placeholder for the host name. It's all in how the browser engine is interpreting that URL field. In Apple's case, it's showing the incorrect, spoofed URL instead of the real one. We've talked about this before on previous episodes with Punycode, with how sometimes with Cyrillic or other alphabets that are not non-normal, non-traditional for United States at least. Alphabets could be showing an incorrect, what would look like a correct URL, apple.com, but the A is really a Cyrillic A, and it's really not apple.com. And depending on the web browser, it may or may not display it correctly. So this is kind of a situation like that where they just need to be doing a little bit better checking on what input the browser engine is getting from that QR code to generate that URL.
5 topics, 30-minute show, give or take. That's at most 6 minutes per topic. I say all of that because obviously there's a lot more to every story that we've just covered, and we would like you to have access to that more information. So we have a website, SecureMac.com/checklist. Go there, look for the show notes for episode 83 or for any past episodes as well. Lots more to find out. SecureMac.com/checklist. If you have a question you'd like to ask or a topic you would like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. That address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. And we'll talk to you next week.